Yes, guys, welcome to our today's class. Today we're going to talk about virtual LANs. It's going to be our part number 2. We're going to discuss about how you can create departments, how you can separate a department in your company, and how to make those departments communicate. Remember, you can have buildings, and in different buildings, there are different people. Maybe those guys are working in the same department. How to connect them, how to separate them, and how to secure them. Right? Without wasting my time, remember, guys, you got my email address and my phone number below. You can use those details if you want to get registered. If you want to be part of this program, just use this WhatsApp number or my email address, and I will register you to a Cisco course, particularly to this CCNA too. Let's start. I'll try to share my screen. So yes, guys, what you're gonna do, you're gonna have your simulator like up and running. We are going to have like, let's say, this is your company. Your company has maybe 3 floors. So there's a building of your company with 3 floors. Okay. So no color here. I don't know why I didn't pick up any color. Okay. This is the color that I wanted. And there's another one here. There's another building one side. And which color? Okay. And the last one, I think it was yellow. Okay. Yes. So now we're gonna put computers. But before putting computers, so you have building A, and this one, it can be building B. You have floor 3 at HR department. There also floor 3 HR department. Floor 2 sales department. Floor 2 sales department. Floor 1 marketing department. And there also floor 1 marketing department. And we are going to have some of the computers. There is one computer there, right? You just drag and drop some of the computers. Yes, sir. So, and let's say you have a switch there, you have a switch there, and you're gonna run your cables from the switch. Oh, let me see. Okay, let's plug it in order. Maybe on fast Ethernet 1. This one, I'm gonna plug it maybe to 10. And this one, I'm gonna plug it to 20. So this PC0 goes to fast Ethernet 0/1. This one goes to fast Ethernet 0/10, and the last one 0/20. The same I'm gonna do here. This flow number 3. So it will go to 0/1. This one can go to slash or maybe 10. And the last one, like, can go to 2. So you can plug wherever you are, right? So, and those 2 switches, we are going to make them talk, but you must take the fastest one, the fastest port. When you see gigabits, means it's 1000, right? 1000 or 1024 megabits per second. It's more faster than these other ones, right? So we're gonna plug from the gigabits, right? Why we are plugging from the gigabits? Because this switch got computers and this switch got a computer. So we want the fastest port, like in order to connect those 2 buildings, right? So now the idea is like this, right? We want only this guy from the yellow side, from the HR department, to talk to these guys from another building, but they are working in the same department. So we are in the same department, but in different locations. But we must belong to the same network, like in order for us to be managed properly, like in order for us to be secured, right? And the green ones, we're gonna make them like in their own networks, right? So what are you gonna do now? You need to configure the switches. You need to create a network for the yellow one, for the blue one, and for the purple one. I don't know which color, right? Remember, my friends, speaking guides, so sometimes the colors, like English, it's not mine, it's for you guys. So what you're gonna do, you go to this switch, you're gonna create 3 departments, 3 networks, 3 VLANs, and you go to this particular switch, you're gonna create 3 VLANs. So if your company has 10 departments, you can also create 10 departments, but you have to do it from the switch. So you go to your switch, you go to CLI, you can press like enter, like enable, T, configure terminal. What you're gonna do, let's check first what is there, what are the networks available like inside your switch, right? What are the VLANs, virtual local area networks, like available? Do show VLANs, right? Do show VLAN, you press enter. Let's make it a bit big. Okay, when you press do show VLAN, let's see how many VLANs are there by default. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are always 5 VLANs by default. There is the VLAN 1, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. Those are the default VLANs that are there. You cannot delete them. You cannot delete VLAN 1, you cannot delete VLAN 1002, and so on. So those are the default. You cannot delete them. You can even see them here. 1, this. You cannot delete them, right? So, and the VLAN 1, we call it default VLAN. So a switch comes with a VLAN by default, like a network by default, a virtual network by default. We call it VLAN 1, right? So it's always like active. So, and all the port by default, they belong to a VLAN 1, right? So if you have a switch, your switch will have port by default. So all those ports belong to the family 1, to the VLAN 1, the default VLAN by default. So if you can plug any computer to one of the ports here, by default, that computer will belong to the default VLAN, which is VLAN 1, right? So now from 1 to 1002, so you can create any VLANs and give it any number. It can be VLAN 20, VLAN 100, VLAN 1000, but up to 1001. Don't use 1002. We call those type of VLAN normal VLANs, right? They are just the normal VLANs. Understand? So you can create any VLAN, give it a number, but don't give it 1002 because those are the default. So the maximum we can give is 1002 or 1001. So, but we're gonna see what we call the extended VLANs. Extended VLAN will start from 1006 up to 4099, but we are going to see it later on. So you need to understand this. When you have a VLAN, we do have what we call default VLANs. You cannot delete them, like VLAN 1, VLAN 1002, 1003, 1004, and 1005, right? Now, what we're gonna do, we're gonna create those 3 VLANs. By default, we can start maybe VLAN 10, you can give it like any number, but not the default one. You press enter. Name, we can call it like HR, you press enter, you continue. VLAN 20, remember the number, you can give it like any number, but between 1 to 1002. Press enter. Sales, you press enter. Oh, no. Name sales, you press enter. VLAN 30, you press enter. Name, it was marketing. So you are done with creating VLANs. For you to check, you can say, do show VLANs. VLAN, right? You can see that there are more VLANs here. So when you go to VLAN column, you can see there is 10, there is 20, there is 30 that you created. So, and what are their names? The first one is default. The second one is HR, sales, and marketing, right? This is how you can create those VLANs. But see here, we don't have ports yet that belongs to those VLANs. We don't have kids yet that belongs to those families, right? What we're gonna do, you go again to the second switch, you do the same, all right? CLI, press enter. See, you can check your VLANs, do show VLAN. You press enter. See, right? You can see like there is only the default one, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. Remember by default, so all the port belongs to this family, to the VLAN 1. So we're gonna create the VLANs. Maybe VLAN 10, you press enter. Name, I think it was HR. VLAN 20, name sales. VLAN 30, name marketing. You press enter and you can check, do show VLAN. You press enter, you can see that those VLANs, they are created, right? So this is gonna be very useful. Sometimes I'm not connected to the network because I'm belonging to a wrong VLAN, to a wrong virtual networks, right? So how to check it, do show VLANs. You must always know how to go to the VLANs database and check which ports belong to which VLANs, right? Now, guys, you are done creating VLANs, right? Because you are done creating VLANs, let me first do some of the configurations and make sure that you can see where you plugged your cables. You just go to options, you go to preferences, and you click to always show ports labels. You click there and you close. So it will show you where did you plug, right? Some of the things. So it's so easy because you can see now. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna take this port, this FA0/1, we're gonna make it part of HR. So we're gonna say port 0/1, you are part of HR family. Port 0/10, you are part of sales department, and port 0/20, you are part of marketing department. So what does it mean? We are going to assign ports to specific families, to specific networks, to specific virtual networks. So you have a switch, that switch has port. You are going to choose which ports will belong to which network, to which VLANs. It's your decisions. You can say port number 1, you are part of VLAN 10. What is VLAN 10? Maybe it's sales department. So what's going to happen? So everybody will come to plug his computer, his camera, his printer to that specific port. Automatically, that computer will belong to that network. Because you as a specialist, you as a network guys, you did that. You already told your ports, which family they belong to, right? You can even go to your wireless like access point. You can say from this range, from this port, from this network, use this port, right? So what we're gonna do, we need to go to your switch. You tell your switch which port belong to which network. Now, how to do it? We call it port assignment. You have to assign port to VLANs. So when you are learning about VLANs, you need to know how to create VLANs. But if you create VLANs, it's like you create families. There is nobody inside those families. You need to decide the kids who are going to be part of those families. Your kids are your ports, right? So you have to choose ports that are going to belong to networks, to virtual networks. So what you're gonna do, you go to your switch, right? So you access your switch, like enter, you exit first, right? Now we're gonna go to the specific interface. Which interface will belong to which network? So you got so many kids, you have to decide where your kids will belong, which family your kid will be, right? So you must give the name of the port, like interface, like F0/1, that's a shortcut, but it interface fast Ethernet 0/1. You press enter, all right? Now, from here, you have to say this switch port mode like access. Guys, when you have a port from your switch, your port can be like an access port or a trunk port. So every port from your switch will be an access port or a trunk port. Access ports means you are going to use that port to plug printers, to plug cameras, to plug computers. So it's a port that will allow your computers, your printers, your other devices to access the network. That's why we call it access, right? So for every port, you must decide which mode. Is it an access mode or a trunk mode? Access means that port, this interface, fast Ethernet 0/1, will be used to connect computers, to connect printers, cameras, and so on, not for connecting other networks. No, so access port will be used for connecting devices, not networks, like routers and so on. So now you're gonna press like enter, right? So switch port mode access. So you are telling this port, you're gonna work as an access port. What does it mean? So you're gonna be used to plug the computers, to plug the printers and so on. Now, you have now to decide which family these ports will belong. So you're gonna say again, switch port access VLAN 10. So you're gonna say switch port access VLAN 10. So it means this port, you're gonna make it part of this family, it's part of this network. So everybody gonna plug to this port, so automatically that computer will belong to VLAN 10. What is VLAN 10? It's your HR department, and you press enter. Right? So if you wanna check, do show VLAN. Remember, I'm using do because I'm using the wrong mode. So I must use my privilege as an administrator. This is the meaning of do. But normally you must go to the privilege mode, right? Press enter. See here now, see the column of your VLAN, of your virtual networks. You have VLAN 1, you got 10, you got 20, 30, and so on. What are their names? The 1 is the default, and your 10 is the HR. What is the status? It's active. And which ports belong to HR? It's port FA0/1. Right? This is how to assign a specific port to the HR department. You're gonna see that from here, this port is not belonging there anymore. It's not belonging to the default. Now it's part of like another family, the HR family, right? We're gonna continue. Now from here, remember, we got the FA0/10. It's part of the sales department. So we're gonna do it again. You press enter. You enter the, okay. You exit first. The interface, fast Ethernet 0/10. You press enter. You need to precise which mode, right? Switch port. If you forgot, guys, use the question mark. You see, they will tell you like from switch port, you can use the access, you can use mode and so on. Now you're gonna remember, say, no, so I'm looking the mode. You type mode. If you forgot again, question mark, what comes like after mode? Right, you're gonna see it's access, switch mode, switch port mode, and access, right? So you make this port an access port, means a port that's gonna be used for plugging the computers, printers, cameras, not for connecting networks. And you press enter, and when you are done, you say that me as a port, so people will plug their computers like to me, their cameras. So which family am I belonging? Which family? Now we're gonna say switch port more switch ports access VLAN 20. You're gonna say, okay, you interface fast Ethernet 0/10. You are going to be working as an access port, means you're gonna be used for plugging the computers, printers, cameras, and so on. And you belong to VLAN 20. You belong to this family. This VLAN 20, it's the sales department. And you press enter. How to check? To show VLAN, you press enter. So when you go to the column of the VLANs, you can see the VLAN numbers, the name, you can see the cells here, and what are the ports that belongs to the cell? It's FA0/10. And if you check here, this port is not here, but it's moved to another department. All right. So now by default, everybody gonna plug its computer to the FA0/10. Automatically that computer will belong to the sales department. And when you belong to the sales department, means that all the configurations that you've done from the sales will be applied to that computer, right? So there's no need for you to go and do manual configuration to every device. Now let's do the last one, the marketing one. It's FA0/20. You exit, interface 0/20. Like switch port, I'm gonna use the tab for completing. Mode access, switch port tab, the access tab, VLAN tab. Which VLAN now? You have to be careful. It's 30, and you press enter. And if you check, you show VLAN, you press enter. You see that this FA0/20 it belongs to marketing, right? Now you exit, right? Now remember, guys, right? You got this port. This port will allow these two switches to communicate, right? So this port will be used, this gigabit 0/1 will be used to connect VLANs from building A and VLAN from building B, but same VLANs, right? You see the yellow one and the yellow one needs to talk. How are you gonna make them talk? By using this port, gigabit 0/1. But you need to tell this port that your job will be to connect same VLANs, but in different buildings, right? So what we're gonna do, you go again there. So you're gonna say interface, gigabit 0/1, you press enter, switch port tab, mode tab. This time around, don't take it as access. you're gonna take it as trunk. So trunk port, so this is the port that's gonna be used to connect same VLANs, but in different buildings, right? So if you have a switch, you create virtual networks, you create different networks, right? You got another switch, also different networks. Now you wanna connect same networks, but in different switches. You must use a trunk port. So you must go to every switch, you choose which one is going to be your trunk port. Trunk port means a port that's going to be used to connect same VLANs, but in different switches. So you press enter and you exit. Now we're going to go to the next switch because you've learned already. Okay, which port we used here? Okay, I think it's the same one. So we're going to do the same configurations. Conf-T, the interface, switch port tab, mode tab, the access tab. Okay, now we can exit. We must create VLANs. VLAN 10, name is HR. VLAN 20, name is sales. VLAN 30, name is marketing. You exit. Right now, we're gonna go back to that interface. We said like it's access port. You press enter. The switch port, the access. So I'm using the tab for you to practice. It's access VLAN 10. You exit. Second, the interface is the 10.1. You press enter. Switch port mode, the access. Switch port, no access. This one, it's VLAN 20. You exit. Last port is interface 0/20. Switch port mode access. Switch port to access VLAN. Yeah, this one is VLAN 30. Now we can check, do show VLAN. You can see them, they are here. You can see like all your department created and the port that belongs to those departments, right? Now, we want this port from this switch to be a trunk port. You must make this port here a trunk port. It means this port gonna be used to connect same VLANs, but in different switches, like this one and this one, right? So we're gonna make this one a trunk port. You press enter, you exit. The interface is a bit 0/1. A switch port mode trunk, and you exit, right? Now we're gonna give the IPs and we're gonna test the connectivities. The yellow ones. So IP is 192.168.1.2 maybe. Control C. You can come on this one too. Desktop like IP. Remember the 2 is already taken. We're gonna put 4 or 3. You come there, you can do the same IP. You can take 4. Come here, maybe 5. You go here. Maybe 6. And the last one, maybe 7. Yes, now we're gonna try this computer here, the yellow ones, we can try to ping if they can talk. Okay, I don't know first that the IP of this one, you must type ipconfig. When you wanna check the network configurations, you go to command prompt, you type ipconfig. Let's see the IP of this computer. Okay, the IP is 192.168.1.5. So you're gonna come there, you try to ping 192.168.1.5. You can see there is a reply, right? Why? Because they are in the same network. They are in the same virtual networks, but in different switches. Why they are able to talk? Because we configured this port as a trunk port. We told those two ports to allow same VLANs to talk, even though they're in different switches. Now let's see if this guy from the blue side, from the sales department, can talk to this guy. Let's try. So we're gonna ping 192.168.1.5. You're gonna see that they won't gonna be able to talk. Why? Because they're in different networks. They're in different VLANs. There is no communications, right? But later on, next lesson, you are going to see how to make different VLANs in different switches, or even in the same switches, talk, right? How to allow different VLANs in different switches or in the same switch to talk. That's gonna be the next lesson. You see, they cannot talk. But if you try the same blue, they are going to talk. Let's try first this one. Let's check the network configurations. So ipconfig, you press enter. So the IP of this computer is 192.168.1.6. So what does it mean? You go here, you can try to ping 192.168.1.6. You can see that the blue between them, they can talk. Why they can talk? Because they are in the same networks, right? Even though they are in different switches. The same as this one. Let's check the configurations, the ipconfig. You're gonna see that it's the .7. So if you come here, you try to ping 192.168.1.7, you're gonna see there is a communications, right? But if you try like pinging the 5, it won't gonna work. Why? Because they're in different networks, right? They're in different virtual networks. You see, request like timeout. So you can come like maybe if you're using your physical computer, you go to CMD, you press enter. All right. So when you want to know the network configurations for my computer or for your computer, so ipconfig, you press enter, and you can see my IP address. Because I'm using wireless, you must always be careful. I'm using wireless, so my IP is this one. So I can try to ping this IP, the physical one, 141. You can see there is a reply, but most of the time you need to block those ping from the wireless access point from the routers for security purposes, right? Because if I can ping, I can use the secure shell at the telnet to access this device. I can even ping the default gateway. This is my default gateway. So most of the time, this IP is the IP address of the switch, the router, and so on. I'm gonna try to ping it. If I can talk to the default gateway, all right? So if it doesn't work, means they blocked it. But you see, we can talk, we can communicate, right? Okay. So guys, very easy how to connect different VLANs So how to connect same VLANs but in different switches? I was mistaken, right? So what you need to do steps, you create your VLANs, right? You give them names, you assign port to those VLANs, and you configure your trunk port. 4 steps only. Create a VLAN, you give them names, no, even 5. You decide if those ports are going to be the access or the trunk port. You assign ports to those VLANs, and you are done, right? So try to do your exercises. You can add another building here. You create same departments, but remember, there is no need to plug only like on specific port, like FA0/1, FA0. No, you can use different port. The most important is the switch port, access or trunk, and how to assign port to those specific VLANs, right? I just use like same port number just for you to understand better, but you can use any port, right? So thank you very much. What you need to do, start practicing. You can add more VLANs and so on, right? Next time we are going to see how to connect different VLANs in different or same switches.